Hi, welcome to our channel of IGNOU audiobooks, Indira Gandhi National Open University, School of Sciences, SOS, Diploma Postgraduate Diploma Programs, Postgraduate Diploma in Environment and Sustainable Development, PGDESD, MED 001 Understanding the Environment, Block-1 Our Environment and its Components, Unit-1 Introduction to the Environment, 1.1 Introduction. The Earth is the only planet known to support life as we know it. It supplies us with all the resources, the materials we use and the food that we eat or drink. All living organisms have a specific surrounding or medium with which they continuously interact, from which they derive sustenance and to which they are fully adapted. This surrounding is their environment. An understanding of the environment requires that we know what makes up the environment and what its limits are, and why is a scientific study of the environment important. In the natural world where we all live on the planet Earth, life is confined to a very thin sphere around the globe where conditions for sustenance are favorable. Anywhere below or above this layer, conditions become limiting. In introducing the environment, we familiarize you with the various components of the environment and their interaction that make the functional units. You will come to appreciate the interdependence of various components of the environment as you proceed along this course. Objectives: after studying this unit, you will be able to define environment, describe the various components that make the environment, distinguish between natural and man-made environment, recognize the significance of the environment for life's proper functioning, and understand the concept of biosphere and its functional unit, the ecosystems. 1.2 Concept of the environment. Prior to 1950s, for most people the term environment meant the set of conditions at home or in their workplaces. In the years that followed, with the publication of Rachel Carson's landmark book Silent Springs, 1960, as well as the occurrence of major environmental events such as the spilling of oil along the picturesque northern coast of France, the death of fish and other organisms in thousands in Swedish lakes due to long-range air pollution, and the much publicized threats of extinction of many species, the concept of the environment gained widespread acceptance. Today, the environment is widely accepted as a major issue for the very survival of humans and other life forms the world over, with serious social and political ramifications. It is realized that a concern for the environment is an integral part of the overall process of development and economic growth. This issue is particularly important for developing nations, which need to keep promoting economic activities in order to improve the living standards of their people. At present, there are 3 points on which there is general agreement with regards to the environment. The environment is a common concern for both industrial and developing countries, although problems resulting from poverty and affluence are different. The solution of environmental problems can only be achieved through international cooperation. Integration of economic growth and environmental protection must be done according to the sustainable development approach. Although the importance of certain environmental issues may change with time, the principles governing the underlying biological and physical systems do not change. Hence, the basic ecological concepts need to be understood too, for ecology deals with the interactions between the organisms and their environment. Let us now examine what we mean by the environment in scientific terms. You are aware that no organism can exist in isolation without interacting with other organisms and its physical influences like light, moisture, temperature, soil, etc. In very broad terms, we can say its environment or surroundings. Thus, we can define environment as the sum total of living and non-living components influences and events surrounding an organism. The living components are called the biotic components, while the non-living are called abiotic or physical components, Table 1.1. However, it is important to understand that the living and physical components are intimately interwoven and interdependent. They cannot be looked upon in isolation, and we classify them in separate categories only for convenience. For example, the Earth as a planet has been profoundly altered by the life that inhabits it. The Earth's air, oceans, soils and sedimentary rocks are very different from what they were before the evolution of life. In many ways, life helps control the makeup of air, oceans and sediments. Table 1.1 Components of the environment: abiotic, light, energy, radiation, atmospheric gases and wind, temperature and heat flow, water, gravity, topography, geological substratum, soil, biotic, microbes, plants, animals, including human beings. The physical components set the condition for the survival of the biotic components, which in turn take care of the maintenance of the environment. Thus, linkages among components of the environment are pathways for the flow of energy and cycling of materials. For example, green plants obtain essential resources from the physical realm, water and minerals from the soil, carbon dioxide from the atmosphere and light, energy from the sun, and manufacture their food. Animals depend on plants and other animals for their source of food. We in turn harvest the land and the seas for our food, obtain minerals, fuel from the Earth's crust. We will learn more about these later in this course. 1.3 Types of environments. Recall the definition of the environment and consider a fish living in a natural pond. Its external environment will be the water in the pond which it primarily inhabits. The water would contain nutrients, oxygen, and other organisms that the fish requires to sustain its life. As opposed to the external environment, the body cavity within the fish provides an internal environment quite separate from the outside environment. The body surface acts as an exchange barrier between the internal and the external environment of the fish. The internal environment is relatively stable as compared to the external environment. However, illness and injury or even environmental stress can upset it. But when the cause of the upset is removed, the internal environment comes back to its original condition. The pond which the fish inhabits is a natural environment. The abiotic factors of the pond, like light, temperature, depth, nutrients, and dissolved gases, will provide the life supporting chemical and physical factors for the fish. The other living organisms inhabiting the pond, like bacteria, insects, worms, mollusks, tadpoles, frogs, submerged vegetation, etc., could be food for the fish. Examples of such natural environments on land include forests, grasslands, savanna, deserts, etc. In any of these natural environments, the climate, physiological, edaphic, soil-related, and biotic factors interact with each other and influence the life forms. So far we have discussed only the natural environment, but there are several components of environment which are created by humans, like crops, fields, cities, industrial spaces, etc. Fig. 1.1 and Table 1.2. These are places made artificially by humans through planned manipulation. For example, let us consider a city. The city environment is totally created by human beings. One of the most important components, water, is not taken from streams directly but is first filtered, purified and used for drinking and other municipal purposes. The metabolic waste and garbage are not disposed of locally but are carried for treatment or dumping to a remote place away from the city. Food for The people in cities often comes from rural areas, natural environment, ocean, lakes, ponds, rivers, forest, grasslands, deserts, etc., man-modified environment, orchards, plantations, sanctuaries, parks, man-made environment, industries, cities, towns, crop fields, artificial lakes, dams, an environment made by humans results in the consumption of excessive amounts of materials and energy necessitating care, supervision and management, and often interferes with the natural environment. Significance of the environment for life. Whatever type of environment organisms inhabit, they all need life-supporting elements for their survival. These include air that they breathe, food and water they take in, and shelter either as natural enclosures, like caves and tree holes, or as artificial dwellings, like houses. Environment is the only source that provides these life-supporting elements. We make use of the land for cultivating crops. Soils provide nutrients needed for the growth of plants. The land form determines the soil types found in any one area, and soil itself varies from place to place. Some soils are rich in nutrients and others are lacking in them. The soils lacking nutrients need the addition of fertilizers. Climate and short-term weather changes are characterized mainly by wind, temperature, pressure and rainfall, and are determined by the properties of the atmosphere. Air in the atmosphere provides living organisms with oxygen, without which survival of most of the living organisms will be threatened. From the above description you have learnt about the concept of the environment, the different types of environments, and about the significance of the environment for life. Next we will find out where these environments exist on planet Earth. 1.4 Concept of Biosphere and Ecosystem. The relatively thin zone of air, soil and water where life exists is known as the biosphere. It extends from the depths of the oceans to about 10 kilometers high up in the atmosphere and includes all the rivers, lakes, ponds as well as the solid sediments that exchange material with living beings. Life in this zone depends on the sun's energy and on the circulation of heat and essential nutrients. The only exceptions are the life forms found in the deep-sea hydrothermal vents that depend on the energy from the earth. This energy is used and given off as materials are recycled. Since living organisms need essential elements for survival like air, water and land, the biosphere includes parts of the atmosphere, hydrosphere and lithosphere. Fig. 1.2. When the concept of the biosphere was first proposed, it was considered to be the Earth's integrated living and non-living life-supporting system. Although it was proposed as early as 1920 by the Russian scientist Vladimir Ivanovich Vernadsky, 1868 to 1945, it was only in the recent times that it has been widely adopted and used. The integration of living organisms and the non-living life-supporting system mentioned in the concept of the biosphere has occurred in many ways. For instance, the biosphere times contributes to the global energy system, times affects rates and patterns of weathering within the lithosphere, times plays an important role in the water cycle, times links the lower atmosphere, troposphere, with the lithosphere, times provides a vehicle for the transfer of chemicals via the biogeochemical cycles. Fig. 1.2 Idealized scheme of the biosphere in relation to atmosphere, hydrosphere and lithosphere. The area of contact and interaction between these components is important for life. For it is here that the basic processes of life like photosynthesis and respiration occur. You will come to know more about the above processes in later units. Originally, the concept of the biosphere was applied to the Earth's surface where plants and animals made their home. In recent times, the biosphere has been extended by Gaia hypothesis to include parts of the atmosphere and subsurface geology that were previously thought of as non-living. For centuries, scientists have viewed the Earth and its environmental systems as a sort of mechanical machine driven by physical forces like volcanoes, rock weathering, and the water cycle. It was clear that organic activities played an important role in some environmental systems, such as the biogeochemical cycles. However, until quite recently, biological factors were seen as secondary to physical and chemical ones. A revolutionary new theory was put forward by James Lovelock in 1970s. He called it the Gaia hypothesis, after the Greek earth goddess. The theory was revolutionary because it treated the Earth as a single living organism in which the biological, chemical, and physical factors played important roles. Lovelock argued that the Earth's living and non-living systems form an inseparable whole, regulated and kept adapted for life by living organisms themselves. He sees Gaia as a complex entity involving the Earth's biosphere, atmosphere, oceans, and soil, and constituting a feedback system which seeks an optimal physical and chemical environment for life on this planet. However, Lovelock regarded the biosphere as a single organism, called a super-organism by some scientists. Looking closely at plants and animals in the biosphere, naturalists observed groups of plants and animals in the biosphere arranged in an orderly manner. Two concepts emerged from their observations which led to the use of the term ecosystem to describe the complex interactions between living organisms and their non-living surroundings. The term ecosystem was coined by the British plant ecologist Sir Arthur George Tansley to stress the concept of each locale or habitat as an integrated whole. The first concept was that plants and animals formed a natural association, each with distinctive members. Just like morphological data allowed systematists to assign species to a hierarchy of taxonomic groups, detailed studies of the ecological distributions of plants led to the classification of biological communities. The second concept was the realization that organisms are linked both directly and indirectly by means of their feeding relationships. Arising from these, the concept of the ecosystem was formulated. A system is a collection of interdependent parts that function as a unit and involve inputs and outputs. An ecosystem represents the sum of all natural organisms and the non-living life-supporting substances within an area. It was considered as an open system with a series of major inputs and outputs, and these effectively drive the internal dynamics of the system. The ability to recognize distinctive ecosystems in the biosphere gave ecologists a convenient scale with which to consider plants and animals and their interaction. This is because it is more localized and thus more specific than the whole biosphere. A variety of natural ecosystems are found in the biosphere, and you will come to know about them, their components, and their functioning in later units. 1.5 Why should we be concerned about the environment? Why is there so much concern about the environment today? The answer is simple. Our very existence depends on the conservation or well-being of the environment. The unprecedented population growth and economic progress of the 19th and 20th centuries have expanded our demands on the environment. However, today the whole world, particularly the developing countries, are facing a near-crisis situation regarding the environment. Perception of environmental concerns differs with different societies. What some people may consider to be a serious problem may be the solution for a different problem. For example, if a factory is set up in a village, the villagers might be happy because as it provides more jobs for the local population's economic growth. while some others may feel that the setting up of the factory would pollute the environment, generate more waste and decrease the standard of living. However, broadly there are three prevailing viewpoints regarding the environmental concerns. 1. The environmental concern is a conspiracy of the developed first world against progress in the third world, and that environment will become an issue of importance only when the underdeveloped countries reach the levels of production and consumption of the industrialized nations. 2. The second viewpoint argues strongly that the emphasis on preserving, for instance, the tiger and the aesthetic beauty of green belts is diverting the attention from the problems of the poor, and that environment has nothing to do with providing a better deal to the large and ever-growing population. 3. The third, in a paradoxical turn, holds this very same large and ever-growing population responsible for the environmental crisis, maintaining that there is too little of everything except people. The three different views illustrate how little we know of ecosystems and ecobalance. Let us examine each of these views briefly. The first view is that environmental concerns are the business of rich countries which cause most of the pollution. But environment and development are not necessarily incompatible. The mistake made by developed countries can be avoided if proper developmental strategies are worked out. Further, there is no division such as the environment of developed countries and that of developing countries. Degradation of the environment is going to affect each of us irrespective of the country, region or area. An example is the Chernobyl disaster, which has the potential to affect a total of thousands of human and animal lives and devastate large areas of land within and outside the former Soviet Union. Proponents of the second viewpoint would prefer development to improve the lot of the poor at the cost of environmental conservation. But in this model, the poor will get the worst of everything, including the effects of pollution resulting from industrialization and urbanization. We had a burning example of this in Bhopal tragedy, in which thousands of the poorest of poor people died. The poor are worst affected by impure drinking water, unsanitary living conditions, disease and so on. The point raised in the third viewpoint that population pressure leads to environmental degradation is an old one. The problem is not so much of the poor destroying the environment by their sheer numbers as that they are deprived of their share in the distribution of resources. It should, therefore, be clear that there are factors other than poverty and population which are responsible for the pollution on the earth. You must understand that environment is not just pretty trees, threatened plants, animals and ecosystem. It is literally the entity on which we all subsist and on which the entire agricultural and industrial development depends. Development without concern for the environment can only be short-term development, often causing enormous environmental degradation apart from human suffering, increased poverty and oppression. With these few words of caution, we summarize the contents of this unit. 1.6 Summary times the concept of environment is the surrounding of an organism, including its life, supporting physical and biological factors, times the different types of environments include external environment, internal environment of an organism, and the natural and man-made environment in which the species survive, times biosphere is the region on the earth where all living organisms survive. An ecosystem is the basic functional unit in nature defined by ecologists. Ecologists help to understand the complex relationships between living organisms and their surrounding, times human beings in search of food, shelter and material comfort affect the environment either advertently or inadvertently. The impact of the human society has multiplied over last several hundred years. Thank you. Subscribe to our channel for more updates, and we will see you with the next chapter.